Imagine a new people arriving on your shores. They come in dark clouds that blot out the sun for 3 days and 3 nights, and the very first thing they do is burn their own ships, deliberately stranding themselves and leaving no possibility of retreat. You'd know right away you weren't dealing with ordinary invaders. Now, what is going on, everybody? My name is Jason Hamilton. I'm a fantasy author, and I'm obsessed with all kinds of mythological stories. This is Myth HQ, where we dive into the best characters and tales from around the world, and today we're talking about the dramatic entrance and the story of the Tuatha Dé Danann, the divine race that declared war for the soul of ancient Ireland. The story of the Tuatha Dé Danann, the people of the goddess Danu, doesn't begin in Ireland. It starts far to the north in 4 mythical cities: Fallius, Gorius, Mirius, and Findius. The Tuatha Dé Danann were descendants of an earlier race who had been driven from Ireland, and in these northern islands, they spent years mastering the arts of magic, druidry, and prophecy. They became something more than human, masters of forces beyond our comprehension. When they finally returned to Ireland, they didn't come empty-handed. From each of these 4 cities, they brought a sacred treasure, an object of immense power. From Fallius, they brought the Stone of Destiny. It was said this stone would cry out in joy whenever the rightful High King of Ireland set foot upon it. From Gorius came the Spear of Lu. No battle could ever be won against the one who wielded it. From Findius, it carried the Sword of Light, belonging to their king Tuatha. Once drawn, nothing could escape it. And from Mirius came the Cauldron of the Dagda. This cauldron provided an endless supply of food and drink, and no company ever left it unsatisfied. Armed with these treasures and their mastery of magic, they shrouded their arrival in a dark mist, forcing their own hand by burning their ships. They had returned to their ancestral home, and they were here to stay, but they weren't alone. Ireland already had rulers, a people known as the Fir Bolg. The Tuatha Dé Danann, led by their king Tuatha, went straight to them with an offer that was really an ultimatum: give us half of Ireland or we fight for all of it. The Fir Bolg, proud and unwilling to give up their kingdom, chose battle. The two armies met at Moytura, the Plain of Towers, and for 4 days the battle was absolute chaos. It was a brutal, bloody affair, but the Tuatha Dé Danann had an edge. They were not just warriors, they were masters of magic and possessed superior weapons. The turning point came in a duel between the two kings. Tuatha faced the champion of the Fir Bolg, a warrior named Sren. In the ferocious exchange, Sren swung his massive sword and with a single blow cleaved King Tuatha's right arm clean off at the shoulder. Despite this devastating blow to their king, the Tuatha Dé Danann rallied and ultimately won the battle. They proved to be surprisingly merciful in victory, and they offered the defeated Fir Bolg a truce, allowing them to take one of the 5 provinces of Ireland, Connacht, as their own. The rest of the island now belonged to the Tuatha Dé Danann, but their victory came at a great cost, and not just in lives. According to their sacred laws, a king had to be physically perfect, unblemished, and with his arm gone, Tuatha was no longer fit to rule. With Tuatha disqualified, the Tuatha Dé Danann needed a new king. They chose Brace, a prince renowned for his stunning beauty. But Brace had a dark secret. He was only half Tuatha Dé Danann. His father was a king of the Fomorians, a monstrous, chaotic race who were the ancient enemies of everyone in Ireland. Think of them like the Titans of Greek myth or the Jotun of Norse. Brace's loyalty was not with his mother's people. He immediately began to favor the Fomorians, imposing crippling taxes and tributes on the Tuatha Dé Danann. He turned these proud divine people into his slaves, and he was also legendarily cheap. In ancient Ireland, a good king was known for his generosity. Brace failed spectacularly. It was said that a guest's knife was never greased with fat at his table, and their breath never smelled of ale after a feast, the ultimate signs of a worthless host. For 7 long years, the Tuatha Dé Danann suffered under his rule. Meanwhile, their deposed king, Tuatha, hadn't been idle. The great physician Dian Cecht, with the help of the right Creedne, fashioned him a new arm made of silver that could move and function just like a real one. With his body whole again, he could be king. The Tuatha Dé Danann wasted no time in deposing the tyrannical Brace and putting Tuatha of the Silver Hand back on the throne. But an exiled king is a dangerous thing. Brace fled to his Fomorian father and returned with a massive army, ready to take back Ireland by force and crush the Tuatha Dé Danann for good. And by the way, I choose not to run ads or have sponsors interrupt these stories because we're completely self-funded. I do have something for you though, and if you like fantasy stories inspired by these myths, you should check out my Fantasy All Access library. It's where my team and I publish all our mythology-inspired novels set in one huge shared universe, and it's how we fund Myth HQ. So if that sounds cool, the link is down below, and thank you for considering it. As Tuatha prepared for the inevitable war, a stranger arrived at the gates of his capital, Tara. He was young, brilliant, and claimed to be a master of every art, a smith, a champion, a sorcerer, a physician, a poet. The gatekeeper followed protocol, said that Tara already had a master of each of those arts and they didn't need another. The stranger, whose name was Lu, then asked, "But do you have any one man who is a master of all these arts at once?" The gatekeeper had no answer. He took the message to King Tuatha, who invited Lu inside. Lu proceeded to defeat the court's best in every challenge, from games of strategy to feats of strength. Tuatha, recognizing Lu's extraordinary talent, knew this was the leader they needed. He stepped aside, placing Lu in command of the Tuatha Dé Danann forces for the coming war. This Lu was called Savildonach, the equally skilled in many arts, and he was the grandson of the Fomorian king himself, Balor of the Evil Eye. The stage was set for a final epic confrontation. And that brings us to the second battle of Mag Tuired. This wasn't just a battle, it was a war for their very existence. Lu moved through the Tuatha Dé Danann's camp, asking every man and woman what skill they brought to the fight. The physicians promised to heal any warrior who wasn't decapitated, and the sorcerers vowed to cast the mountains of Ireland down upon the Fomorians. The cupbearers swore that they would magically hide all the lakes and rivers of Ireland, leaving the enemy to die of thirst. Everyone had a role. United, they marched to meet the Fomorian horde. The battle was even more brutal than the first. In the chaos, the great Fomorian king Balor unleashed his secret weapon. He had a single massive eye that, when opened, could kill anyone it gazed upon with his poisonous venom. He scanned the battlefield, and his devastating gaze fell upon King Tuatha of the Silver Hand. The first king of the Tuatha Dé Danann fell, dead. But Lu was ready. As Balor's eyelid, heavy and drooping, was being pried open by his attendants, Lu took his sling, loaded a stone, and launched it with perfect accuracy. The stone shot into Balor's eye, driving it out the back of his skull, turning its deadly power on the Fomorian army behind him. With their champion dead, the Fomorians broke and fled. After the battle, Lu found the disgraced former king Brace alone and pleading for his life. In exchange for his life, Brace offered to teach the Tuatha Dé Danann the secrets of agriculture: when to plow, when to sow, and when to reap. With the Fomorians defeated and the knowledge of the land secured, Lu became the new High King, and a golden age of peace began for his people. But peace never lasts. Eventually, a new group of invaders arrived in Ireland, the Milesians, the sons of Mill, who are said to be the ancestors of the modern Irish Gaels. They were mortal, but they were determined, and after a series of magical struggles and negotiations, a truce was reached that would change the face of Ireland forever. The Milesians would take the land above, the world we know, and the Tuatha Dé Danann in turn would take the land below. They retreated from the world of men, going into the ancient burial mounds and hollow hills, the places known as the She. They did not die, and they were not defeated in the traditional sense. They simply passed into another reality, a parallel dimension of everlasting youth and beauty, the other world. Over time, mortals who saw glimpses of them in these mounds came to call them the Aishi, or the people of the mounds. The gods of ancient Ireland had become the fairies of folklore. So what exactly were the Tuatha Dé Danann? And the answer to that is complicated. The stories we have were written down centuries later by Christian monks. They were faced with a problem. How do you write about your ancestors' pagan gods without committing heresy? They came up with a few solutions. One popular theory was that the Tuatha Dé Danann were fallen angels who hadn't sided with God or Lucifer, and so were condemned to walk the earth. Another, more rational approach was to say that they were just highly skilled people whose magic was mistaken for divine power by less sophisticated folk, a process called euhemerism. But the texts themselves betray this. Names like the Dagda, meaning the good god, or titles like Anu, mother of the Irish gods, make it pretty clear these were once deities. The modern scholar John Carey argues they are a category of their own, not quite gods, not quite heroes, but something unique. Perhaps the best word is simply immortals. They represent the gods of skill, embodying the mastery of arts that pre-Christian Irish society held in the highest esteem: poetry, smithcraft, law, and healing. The idea of them retreating into the She mounds is one of the most fascinating religious transitions in history, and these ancient passage tombs like Newgrange became doorways to the otherworld in the Irish imagination. So the gods didn't die, they just moved next door. This otherworld, known as the Tir na Nog, or the Land of Youth, is a paradise where no one ages and joy is eternal. But time moves differently there. In the famous story of Oisin, a mortal hero who goes to Tir na Nog with his fairy lover, he spends what feels like 3 years lives there. When he finally returns to Ireland, he discovers that 300 years have passed. He crumbles to dust the moment his feet touch Irish soil. This transformation from god to fairies allows their memory to survive within a Christian culture. People might not worship them as gods, but they certainly respected and often feared the Aishi, the powerful otherworldly beings living just out of sight. This explains the deep roots of fairy folklore in Ireland and the lingering belief in a hidden world that coexists with our own. So the gods never left, they just became invisible. The reason I'm able to build this shared universe and make these videos is because of all the support I get from my fantasy group. So if you want to dive deeper into a world where all these myths coexist, that's the place to do it. And it's a group we host on a platform called School, and when you join, you get everything. And I mean all of our ebooks and audiobooks, with at least one new book dropping every month. You also get access to our community and weekly live calls with me where we talk about mythology, writing, and world building. If you want to support the channel and get a mountain of cool stuff in return, check out the Fantasy All Access Library at the link below, and I will see you in the next video.